Welcome to the Feral Tarot,
a podcast where we discuss magic, psychology, the occult, eros, and general weirdness through the lens of the tarot.
Today we're diving into the deep and deeply spiritual ocean that is the High Priestess.
And with the High Priestess, we also begin to dip our toes into the concept of the abyss.
We'll unpack gender and explore how the ancient ideas in Hermeticism resonate with society's rediscovery of gender as a spectrum.
Along with that, we touch on the anima and animus and what happens when they fall out of balance.
Just as a reminder, we're learning right along with you. We both studied these systems for a bit of time before starting this conversation, but we long for your insight, so please drop us a line at theferaltarotpodcast@gmail.com.
And as always, before we get started, we want to acknowledge that TFT is recorded on unceded Ohlone land, and we offer our gratitude and respect to their elders, past and present.
Furthermore, we recognize the tarot has been shaped by the systems of patriarchy and imperialism as a result in its time in the Aeon of Osiris.
And with that, let's get into it with the High Priestess. Yeah, it occurred to me, since we're starting from the Fool's journey, the Fool being 0 and now the High Priestess being 2, there's sort of a non-intuitive sense of like, oh, it's 2, it's like the Fool and then the Magician. I felt like I just uncovered sort of like a unconscious bias of how I look at the cards where you're advancing in somehow complexity or I don't know, conceptually, but really the small card, like the way that Kabbalistic symbolism kind of works is almost in reverse, where we have this almost like base, undifferentiated elements. So yeah, we're dealing with the archetypical worlds, kind of like above. We're gonna be talking about the abyss a lot, but above the formative world, above kind of even thoughts or concepts. So yeah, it's up there.
Yeah. Which I guess is a good point to talk about. Like, I think we touched on it a little bit in an episode, if not the last one. It's Kabbalistic assignment, which is Gimel, which means camel. And this has been kind of, I don't know if theorized is the word, but like it's the rationale for that is it's the beast that can get you across the abyss. Like this is the part of the self that can sustain that long journey outside of consciousness into this desert. Basically, like there's nothing within the abyss. It's pure nothingness. And then when we finally get beyond that, there's the archetypical world. But yeah, this is the part that can survive that. This is like the only thing that will make it past that area. And then I guess there's, also the lovers and the star, or I guess the emperor or the star. It depends on, we'll talk a little bit more on that one, which one.
As far as the right and left paths that also kind of traverse that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The path of hay. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I had an interesting meditation on it come up for me. And this might be getting a little like too advanced, too quick for the episode.
Yeah, let's dive in.
But let's dive into it. And I thought about like the world of formation, or like not the world of formation, but like the formation of consciousness and how like this path was like one of the first ones to just kind of dip below the abyss instead of going through the kind of zigzag thunderbolt descent that we usually see. And I think what brought me there was when we were talking about the magician, I was like, oh, this is like the first kind of male card, and I was absolutely wrong in that. That one is also supposed to be androgynous, or at least that's what Crowley says in the Book of Life. Is the magician and the fool are hermaphroditic, but the High Priestess is the first like fully gendered like female card. Which we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But what the sense I got was once one has formed and then 2 and 3 kind of form simultaneously at that same time, like I think it recognizes itself or like its reflection below the abyss. Mm-hmm. Like I think it's light, so everything's kind of happening at once or faster than we could imagine anyway. But it sees itself below the abyss, or it sees a reflection, and I think it's like the drive of a mother to like hold her child that like makes that path just dive down below the abyss and like pursue that reflection, which is 6. And then at the same time, you have the Empress is kind of like receiving that knowledge that there's something below the abyss and is like reaching out to expand into all things and just like have that. It goes from like that motherly like drive to like hold its child and to like love and engage into like a powerful lust to expand into all things. Yeah, did that make sense?
Yeah, so I want to like break some of that down. So when you say like it sees the reflection of itself, I kind of want to like clarify for anyone listening, like when I'm hearing you say that, I hear like it is sort of this divine, beyond comprehension light of consciousness, of reality, which is we're labeling as feminine. And I guess from my perception in Kabbalistic thought, the idea of gender, the feminine is kind of this like the totality of like reception. So when we talked about this a little bit with the magus, the magician.
Yeah.
The magus is a androgynous character, but also is sort of personifying like a masculine force. I think that's probably an unfortunate reality of how we perceive gender, that the masculine is sort of the default androgynous. We could probably talk more about that. But the projective force is often seen as masculine, whereas the receptivity and kind of I like a lot of like Eastern, I like comparing like Eastern and Western takes on gender because, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my shins are getting a little sore.
Yeah, so Eastern and Western takes on gender. Western gender, I think, often has that like masculine projective versus like feminine receptive, which, you know, there's a grain of truth in all these things. But then also like, and I think we've mentioned this before, the truth of like an opposite. So the idea of like Shiva and Shakti and like the masculine as the void through which like the feminine dances within. So I think kind of in the same vein that the magician is at its core an androgynous card, but kind of masculine. This is also like an all-encompassing androgynous card, but like leaning towards the feminine. And I guess I see that archetype as like the wild woman archetype. So it's like the huntress, which we see in some of the symbolism of the card with like Isis and Artemis and like the bow. She has a bow in the Thoth, the art in the card. So yeah, I was kind of exploring like that wild woman archetype a bit for this, like the priestess.
Yeah. I tend to think of the wild woman archetype. I do vibe with that, but I also tend to think of that like wild woman archetype as the empress. Like the empress is like in a forest, like swinging from vines, and like things are just growing beneath her feet. Whereas the high priestess is more chaste. Like she's considered virginal in a lot of the literature around her. Like she's cloistered in the original Rider-Waite and the Marseille deck, which I actually recently picked up a new tarot book, or it's not a new book, but new to me, which is hang on.
I'm so intrigued about the way that the archetypes, like that we have this little bit of divergence here.
The Way of the Tarot by Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Oh, hell yeah, Jodorowsky.
Yeah, I love that guy. Which, like, I think the Magick or Magic Mountain,
the Holy
the
Mountain.
Holy Mountain. Thank you. Is a great kind of
Magic
exploration.
Mountain sounds like a Disney ride.
Magic Mountain is a Six Flags theme park. No, his the Holy Mountain is a great like meditation on the tarot in and of itself, I think. But yeah, he talks a lot about the High Priestess being virginal because it's the untouched part of the self. This is a part of the self that's wholly spiritual and like is not tainted by Malkuth or the lower formative world. It is like the only part of you that can connect directly to God like that, because it doesn't consider any of the other worlds. It's just spiritual.
Yeah. So I guess I think when I think of like the wild woman archetype, and I'm pretty influenced by the Women Who Run with Wolves text as far as all of the exploring that archetype. And I don't it's written as Women Who Run with Wolves and wild woman archetype, but I read it as like a very core like aspect of the feminine in all people is wild woman. And I guess that I guess I do see it as like the intuition, like the wild self of being kind of having a right sense of being free, like being free from like outside influences that are not healthy for the individual, like being able to kind of sniff out bad situations and it, like that intuitive sense, like your gut, your heart, that's kind of that wild priestess sense.
I see what you're saying as far as wild goes. I was thinking like wild as far as like behavior and like what would be considered like outrageous or like.
No, yeah, like wild woman, like the archetype of like, because like Artemis is that too. Like
totally.
I think, and like virginal was not even necessarily like it has a sexual connotation, but also being sort of like untouched by or like unbeholden to anyone but themselves, I think was the original, and like unbeholden to a man, but unbeholden to outside influences, I guess is how I take that.
Totally. I vibe with that a lot. Another fun thing with the Artemis thing was, I think this was in the Book of Thoth too, is she has a bow, but if you look closer, there's it's a 3-stringed harp because she hunts with sensibility. It's not a tactical, like, rational, like, calculated hunt. It's like playing the harp and drawing in the prey in this case. Yeah,
it's I feel like that harkens to the kind of like receptive nature of like making yourself open to what you want.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about receptivity and projectivity and gender, because I'm sure a lot of people or some people listening may not be familiar with the Hermetic concepts of gender and are like, why are they gendering everything? Because, I mean, you and I are both pretty gender expansive, I guess, would be a good way of putting it. I'm non-binary. I don't know.
Non-binary, is generally what I go for.
Yeah. And I think having like a understanding of Hermetic gender kind of like got me there too. When in higher levels of consciousness, when I was younger and not even exploring these things, I noticed like, oh, that like higher part of myself doesn't even have a gender. It just like is.
Yeah, I think like when you start thinking about consciousness as kind of what is your essence, and then understanding gender as like, yeah, these are the roles and the expectations and the like assumptions about clothing and, you know, the societal trappings, I guess. And most people, I think now, or many people do understand like, oh, like that's what gender is. And like, that makes it easier for people to understand why people might identify as a different gender, because they have, you know, a different feeling of like who they are. And for people who are kind of outside of that binary, yeah, I think there is a lot of crossover to being like, well, yeah, like consciousness or like awareness of self isn't going to be beholden to a lot of those. Like it might kind of dip into them and still like identify with some sort of binary or have an appreciation for it. But it's about kind of about like not taking it too seriously. Like, it's kind of like the eternal trickster, being like outside of like, I'm not going to be stuck in this. I'm not going to be like trapped by it. You know, I might play in it or I might not, but like, you know, not taking it too seriously.
Yeah. It's a part of the spectrum that I can like tune into the spot that feels right when I tune into it. I'm wondering how reconcile implies that there's like a inherent incompatibility, but like how do you kind of make the two ideas fit of like Hermeticism saying like everything has a gender to it, and like, I mean, I think it, you know, falls on a spectrum. I don't think it's implying with that everything, I mean, it does, everything is on a spectrum in Hermeticism anyway. One of the principles is polarity. But yeah, I think one of the ways it could be misinterpreted as having like some kind of sense of gender essentialism.
Yeah, that is I think about that with some frequency.
Yeah. Which for me, I've always kind of just gone back to like, no, it's acknowledging that it's a spectrum and like everything is somewhere on that spectrum. And maybe it's saying it's like one or the other on the spectrum. But like, for example, we're talking about like things like fire being masculine and water being feminine, or earth being feminine, air being masculine. And I think there's maybe a little more wiggle room in those two. Or I guess earth would be like pretty super feminine because it's receiving and holding everything.
Yeah, so it's, I think, understanding that to some degree, like the polarity is not, the polarity exists. Like a polarity exists, like protons and electrons, you know, attract or repel. But the interpretation of what we assign that polarity to is fairly subjective. Like I think that's where there's wiggle room. It's why people are like, oh, is wands fire or are swords fire? Even just thinking about the suits, like that's, I think, where the essentialism can break down and needs to break down. Because yeah, we're all kind of like our own lenses through which that's getting filtered. So both our own experience of it and our interpretation of what exists on that spectrum is going to vary.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation of it. Yeah, it's very much acknowledging the spectrum as opposed to saying everything's essentially on one end of the pole or another.
Yeah, because even people who, like, for example, identify as men or women are going to have different elements of, quote unquote, the other gender, like, because we all have elements.
Hope so.
Yeah, we hope so. Like that's like a healthy psyche is going to integrate elements of both of those, and how people choose to label themselves is entirely, personal and subjective. So,
because then we otherwise come into concepts like anima or animus possession.
Ooh, yeah.
Which are fun to think about. Have you gotten into this concept at all?
So for animus possession, it's a similar concept for, and the Women Who Run with Wolves text talks about animus possession, and that's so that would be the kind of for women having an unhealthy understanding of the masculine and an unhealthy relationship with the masculine. You are going to see the masculine, whatever you deem as masculine, the active, projective, potentially like aggressive, but also potentially protector qualities in yourself as hostile and unsafe. So you'll suppress that within yourself. And then the element of yourself, the animus, that could potentially be, which I kind of see from an animus perspective as like a woman-bodied person, as like actually a relationship to like the HGA. Because we often see that as like the prince quality that's like, I'm going to carry you to higher consciousness. And if you're like, fuck that, you're unsafe because you're a man. I don't want you to whisk me away.
Yeah, I'll whisk myself away.
Hashtag me too. Like, and not to discredit like very real reasons that people have fearful and unhealthy relationships to masculine, but also like we have those qualities within us, and it is very likely to, it's very difficult to heal that quality within yourself if you just like to hold on to that. So yeah, in Women Who Run with Wolves, she talks a lot about Dr. Estes, Clarissa. The inner predator is how this manifests in your dreams and in a lot of like the folk tales that she uses as examples. And the inner predator is sort of like, I'm going to make you listen to me. And like, I'm going to be like, it's not like a healthy driving force. It's like a force that will like cut you down. And I'm trying to think of like an example, but
like an incubus kind of.
Maybe, yeah, because it's like kind of draining. It's kind of like working against you to put energy into suppressing something, and then it like drains you. So it's kind of it's the inner predator rather than like the inner protector.
Gotcha. Huh. That's something to dig into.
For sure, yeah. I could like go off on a tangent with that.
Yeah, no, I want to learn more about this concept. Let's talk more about the card itself. Let's bring things back down. We didn't really talk about how it's usually visualized. We touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about some of the imagery that we tend to come across for it. I guess we'll start off with the Rider-Waite. We tend to go that direction with a lot of these. Rider-Waite and Thoth are go-tos. So we usually see a woman with ceremonial robes between two pillars, the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity, which that's a whole deep symbolism that we could get into. But basically, we're talking about the yin or the yang. She sits between the two of them. And on the Tree of Life, she sits between the two pillars. She's in the middle pillar, as we call it.
I feel like this does relate back to gender, too. Like the just the positioning of being nonpolar and between. Yeah,
'cause she's not on the what we would consider the feminine side, which would be severity,
which I love, honestly. Like just a name like that, I feel like we have a connotation. You might be like, oh, feminine, it's the side of mercy, but no, in Kabbalah the pillar of severity is the feminine side.
Yeah, which kind of ties it back to that Eastern-Western flip a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah. So she sits between these pillars because she's untouched by anything in manifestation. She has a book usually on the Rider-Waite. I think the book says tarot on it, Taro.
Or Torah.
Or Torah. That's the thought, is that she's the master of the Torah. She knows it. That was another thing that came up too, is that she is like super not dogmatic, but like she internally like knows the dogma of religion, whereas the Hierophant has to like kind of like write it out and like
like study it and
Yeah,
teach it.
study it,
she
teach
has
it,
the
like
intuitive
engage with it.
sense.
She just is it. She embodies
Yeah.
it. And then another symbol that I tend to like in that one is pomegranates,
Oh yeah.
which allude to kind of, I think, like the totality of everything, like it's spheres within spheres, worlds within worlds. And
Fractals. It's all fractals.
it's all fractal, exactly. There need to be more spheres inside of pomegranates. I need to like write to the pomegranate manufacturers and just like, can you make more spheres within the spheres? You're doing a really good job so far, but like we've come a long way with fractals. Can you just like make tinier little
I'm imagining
little
like,
arrows,
like the more cowbell meme, like the SNL. It needs more spheres.
Need more spheres. Let me pull out the card too.
All right, while you're doing that, I'm gonna. All right, you've pulled out the card.
Pulled out the card, yeah. And it looks like a banner of pomegranates behind her and trees, but they're also arranged in what we usually see as the tree of life arrangement. And she's got the moon at her feet, and I think this speaks to, well, this is the moon card. If we're going to tie this back to astrology, this one typically represents the moon, not the moon, as some people would think, which is Pisces. But this, I think in a few of the different things, talks about her being like the highest aspect of the moon, which is, I think, speaks to how she's reflecting like the higher sun, like not the Tiferet sun, the middle sun that we usually think of, but like the light of the divine, like the light of the monad for the rest of the spheres, where the moon in 9 reflects the light of 6. But they're all on that middle pillar. Yeah. That is probably the Rider Waite. She also has like a crown that has kind of lunar crescent qualities to it. There's also a sphere in the middle of it, which I guess the hat probably represents the threefold moon. You have the waxing, the full, and the waning.
Yeah, the mother, maiden, and the crone.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is actually quite in line with the Marigold Tarot, which has a crescent moon. Also, it's actually pretty similar as far as a lot of these cards go. The one thing that this one does note is that it does not appear with any texts or scrolls. They wanted to emphasize the removal from the material world.
I like that a lot because, yeah, she, like we were saying, doesn't read the Torah. Right. She is the Torah.
She is, yeah. And so, yeah, little in the way of embellishment or physical trappings. And they did want to emphasize, too, like oral tradition. So that is kind of the embodiment. Like you're carrying it in your body and it's transmitted through your voice. But yeah, the emphasis of this kind of intuitive understanding. And then she does also appear with the pomegranate and more garlands.
And she is cloistered in that one as well. But I mean, I guess all of the figures in the...
Many of them are.
Okay.
But yeah, she has kind of the head covering.
That's a good one. And then in the Thoth deck, she is ass naked. Except for
the veil of light. I mean, yeah, she's clothed like in the veil of light.
Yeah, that was what it says. Is she's clothed in the veil of light. Yes. But like that's it. Which I think, even if the card was called like the Virgin, Crowley would make it naked because that's kind of his sensibility.
That's the style, yeah.
Yeah. But we also touched on she has the bow that is a harp in her lap. She's also kind of like fanning out the veil of Isis, which is the like net of Indra, I guess is the other term for it. which is like, if you're not familiar with the concept, each little person is a point on that net, and there's a grid connecting everyone, and it kind of makes a net that we all exist within. That's the grid.
And then all the intersections are like a jewel, which she does also have jewels kind of at her feet in the fifth deck. Yeah.
There's jewels, there's cacti to represent life in the desert, seeds, because she is the beginning of life. And then there's also a camel, just to like make it really
obvious.
It's camel.
I do love that imagery of like, because the camel is not it's not present in a lot of the traditional.
Yeah.
But it makes perfect sense when you think about like the abyss and what the High Priestess is about.
Totally. Another interesting thing with the camel and gimel is supposedly the word gimel also could mean rope, which is to imply like a rope pulling you up from below the abyss, like a rope that's been sent down to you. And it also lends something to the quote, it's easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. Like, rope makes a little more sense. It's still hard to get rope through the eye of a needle, but it's not as like hyperbolic as a camel. It like kind of like ties in a little more. And then also you could get a rope through the eye of a needle by taking it apart.
Oh. Which
is like, yeah, if you get rid of your possessions and your ego, you could get through that eye of the needle. There's less of a absurd hopelessness to it.
Yeah, the I didn't know about the double meaning of the rope, and I kind of love that too, as far as like it is possible. You just have to take it apart down to its, more bare elements. And like when we do think of crossing the abyss, I think of the High Priestess as like initiation.
Mm-hmm.
So that can come through like spiritual practice, and then also through many other, like I think Ram Dass talks about this, and there was an article I read about it as well. That was like, I think when I first was exposed to the idea of like crossing the abyss, and I was just like, tell me more, internet. But so that basically initiation can come through like intentional magical practice, and initiation comes through many other ways of like various overwhelming life events or traumas. And the difference is like, are you doing it intentionally, and do you have the tools to come back from it? So I think a lot about the quote of like the mystic swims with delight in the same waters that the psychotic person drowns in. And if we think of the High Priestess as like that deep intuitive, like psychic, mystic element of ourselves, it's like that part that like is very at home in those waters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got scuba gear.
Yeah, hell yeah. She's got gills almost.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then I guess the Marseille deck is just very similar to the Rider-Waite in that it's a cloistered woman with a book. Mm-hmm. Something Jodorowsky points out, though, in the book is that in her book that she has in her lap, there are 17 lines, and it could be like just because it's a woodcut sort of deck, and that's the amount of lines that got on the page. But he ties it back to the key 17, the star. There's a direct correlation between the High Priestess and the star, which Crowley kind of touches on as well. And this is where the whole, like, is Zadi the star or is Hay the star? But he mentions that, like, after we see the first manifestation of like a feminine card, we also have in the alphabet, Dalet and Hay follow it. Dalet being the High Priestess, which follows it numerologically, and Hay, which there's some debate about. Crowley says Hay is the star, which to me makes a lot of sense because Hay is a receptive point in Yod Hey Vav Hey, the tetragrammaton, and it also fits that it would follow in that those 3 solid female archetypes, which are then followed by the 3 heavily male archetypes being the Hierophant, the Hermit, and the Emperor. Those ones he kind of does a little bit of a stretch to tie back together, I feel like. But there is something there. But I also don't know my Aleph Bet as well as I used to. Like my ex taught me a song that they used to teach like Jewish kids the Hebrew alphabet, and I only remember Aleph Bet. There's like an Aleph Bet something, and then goes Gimel Dalet Hey, and then Vav Zion
Is the
Het Tet.
the order of the Hebrew letters in the alphabet correlating with the tarot order of the which letters are associated with the cards?
I believe it does, but I also think in modern like linguistic Hebrew, there are a few, like 1 or 2 characters that were given different names that were just like manifestations of a different letter. But I'm way out of my element talking about this, so I'm gonna leave it at that. But yeah, you have what I got from that was kind of the implication of how all life starts as female, and then androgens are introduced, and you have the imperfect male as a following to that. But you have the wholly intuitive, and then you have the male descent of that, which is first the Hierophant trying to like write this all down frantically and learn it and like project it outwards. Then you have the Hermit, who's kind of taken these things into like more consideration and maybe adopted more of a receptive quality to it. And then the Emperor, which is just like, I know everything, now I'm going to enforce it upon the world.
And then where do the lovers fall?
The lovers are lovers is just like the yin yang in a card, I think. Like you could very easily just make the lovers card like a yin yang symbol. But I think there's some nuance to that too that could be debated.
So I'm trying to think of the ordering because we're jumping track which is fine because it's not linear. But
there's
I'm just trying
a jump there, yeah.
There's a jump.
Yeah, because Vav Zion would be the lovers. There's a big jump between that and Zadi if the Emperor is Zadi.
So you said you wanted to talk about Zadi is not the star, and I was very curious how that tied into the High Priestess.
That's where it ties in,
with the 17 lines.
Yeah.
Because I was like, that seems like an Emperor topic. But did you want to talk about it more?
We could dig into it a little bit. So what we're talking about is there's in Crowley's Book of the Law, which is like the cultiest thing that Crowley ever did, which is like to say I'm directly channeling these gods
on his honeymoon.
On his honeymoon. I was listening to his biography recently, and that marriage itself was an interesting thing too. It was like not a lavender marriage per se, but like she was about to get married to some dude who she wasn't really that into for her family, and he was like, well, fuck that, just marry me and we'll like go fuck off and I don't know, have fun. Anyway, yeah, he was showing off for Rose in Egypt, and
of course her name was Rose.
Yeah. And was like, look at how powerful a magician I am, and did the bornless ritual inside of one of the pyramids. And she started channeling Horus or Ra. I don't remember which manifestation. And then they like found the Stale of Revealing. But one of the things that it's like the dumbest side note in there, like she's going through like this thing, and then one of the lines is, "And all of my prophets' words are correct, except, by the way, Zadi is not the star." Like, let me just tie in this super specific like tarot reference. But in that time, I guess he figured that Zadi is more the emperor than the star. Because Hey is like way more of a feminine concept. It means like window. And Zadi is a hook, a fish hook, which is definitely more of like a masculine, like piercing thing. And he also made the correlation that like empiric positions are often labeled with the equivalent, like Czar, which is where the word Caesar comes from, is or Kaiser is what the pronunciation of Caesar would have been. But it's got that TZ in it. There's also, Czar for Russian.
Kaiser Permanente?
Kaiser Sosa. And a few other points on that kind of ideas that it represents this like empiric kind of like authoritative thing, whereas Hey doesn't really have that same sort of tie back to it. But it's a very like thelemic only point of view. Like not a lot of, I don't think anyone else adopted the Zadi being the star except for people who were like Crowley followers. But I don't know. What did you think of the concept? What did that bring up anything for you? I remember like we were talking about it ahead of time. I was like, when I get into this, and you're like, yeah, I'll look into it.
Yeah, I remember reading it when I was studying the Emperor card. I confess that I remember the controversy, and I never really got too much into it. I just remember it was one of the more down the rabbit hole esoteric concepts.
Yeah,
and I was like, we'll figure it out when we get to the Emperor.
I hadn't really thought too much about it, like, since I kind of accepted it. Mm-hmm. There was a point in my life where, like, yeah, I'm a Thelemite. This is probably, like, the closest thing to, you know, a good prophecy for this Aeon as we're going to get. So, sure, Zadi's not the star. But, it'd be worth looking back into it. I'm sure we'll loop back around to it in the Emperor. But do you consider Zadi as the star or Hey as the star when you like use it?
Zadi being the Emperor and Hey being like the star.
Yeah.
Why? I don't remind me why the Emperor would be the star.
No, the Emperor would be Hey. So the controversy is...
The controversy is over which card is associated with which Hebrew letter.
Yeah.
And one is out of order,
yes.
Basically. He's saying it wouldn't be this one because the letter symbolism would not match.
Yeah.
I think I sort of maybe did the same thing you did where I was like, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I don't fight with the Hebrew very much. I feel like Lon Milo Duquette kind of inured me to trying too hard to figure it out.
What was this phrase in the chicken Kabbalah? It's like, I'm a chicken Kabbalist. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. That wasn't it.
I know. It would be
but
so.
That's the concept.
Yeah. It's, don't worry about it. I think that's it. It's like, I'm a chicken Kabbalist. Don't worry about it. How do you spell Kabbalah? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Great book, by the way, for anyone who is interested in learning about the Kabbalah is The Chicken Kabbalah by Lon Milo Duquette. I'd pretty much recommend anything he writes when delving into these topics.
It's also just fun to read. He has a great sense of humor and writing style.
So you kind of accepted Zadi as the...
So Zadi being the fishhook and being associated with like the masculine projective quality, not being associated with the star.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that checks out because the star is like a very soft card. It's one of the more like gentle cards, even in the Thoth. Like, she's like a maiden and she's like all flowing lines and like, I mean, I guess like it's tangentially like water fishhook. You could kind of say like shore, but I'm willing to accept Crowley's pretentious side note and be like, yeah, okay. The Emperor can be Zadi.
Supposedly it's not Crowley saying it. It's
Rose.
Hadi, or not, no, Nuit. That's a Nuit's chapter.
Oh, okay.
Zadi is not the star.
So this was a channeled side note?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, even more reason to believe it then.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
if Nuit said it, it's probably true.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with the Empress or the High Priestess. So what else do we have for her? Let me look at my notes and see if we haven't talked about something or other yet.
So I think the only things on my notes are talking. I mean, I didn't have a lot to say about the rust belt. The symbolism is an owl. So
Okay.
I associate the High Priestess with seeing in the dark, like an owl sensibility, being very attuned to small sensory input, or like from the spiritual perspective, like spiritual knowing in like darkness. And then, I guess I had some thoughts about like the shadow side of the High Priestess, since it's often like a pretty positive light, I guess. And I think it's always kind of intriguing to think about like what would theoretically like a reversal of this card entail, or what would like a blocked energy of that look like.
Yeah, what are some of those shadowy parts of it? What would a reversal, for example, look like?
Yeah, so I came up with one site I was looking at has referred to it as a dark nurse, is the shadow side. Because typically if we think of it as an initiatrix, it's like that figure that brings us into awareness and consciousness and like spiritual oneness. So I was kind of intrigued by the phrase dark nurse. Like it would use the spiritual power and like awareness of oneness to do something less than friendly, which I guess that's pretty open to what that might look like.
Yeah, there is a coldness to this card. I know like Jodorowsky talks about that a lot in his part in the part of the book that he talks about the High Priestess. He talks about like a coldness to her. If I were to like, pick it up in a reading and maybe say it as like not as to consider maybe a shadow of it, would be like you might be being told to like quit your bullshit, like, and get right with God, being good, orderly design or direction, good, orderly direction. Like if you, for example, feel kind of guilty about eating meat because like you think, in your heart of hearts that all living things deserve, a good life and not to be murdered at some point, which I mean, nature is full of murder. So anyway, but if that's you, if you're like the kind of person who's thinking about like, how can I reduce harm in life and how can I, live as peacefully as possible, but you like love a good hamburger, it could be your call to be like, hey, this is your true belief. You need to like stick with it. Or like if you're struggling with like an addiction, like, and you're justifying to yourself like, oh, it's fine. It's not like out of control, but like, that it's clouding your spiritual advancement. This could be like a call to like quit your bullshit with that. Like stop doing the thing that doesn't help you.
Yeah, you said addiction, and it made me think of another thing that came up when I was reflecting on this card, which was, again, related to the shadow side, but the addiction to, like, the inner world as a shadow side, like, almost similar to how we talked about, like, the magititis, where you become fixated and almost have, like, an ego blowout of, like, I can do anything, and, like, I can manifest, and, like, this shadow side of having an addiction to, like, going inward, that you lose touch with like material reality and your worldly identity. Kind of similar to that idea of like psychosis, and like you're so fixated on your inner, so it has like a sense of like delusions and like, yeah, getting lost in that.
This is a stage that Ram Dass would talk about as no one's doing the dishes.
Is that a stage
He talked a lot about like when they were at what was the house, Milgram, getting like really high and like none of the dishes were getting done.
No
and like
one's
one of the
doing the
questions was
dish.
like, well, who's going to do the dishes?
Oh my god, it's like the same thing about like in the revolution, like someone still has to do the dishes. Like in your spiritual enlightenment, like there's still
Got to
be,
do the dishes.
still gotta do the dishes.
Yeah. Got to wash the clothes. Got to do the shopping.
Still gotta get groceries.
Yep.
So roll that boulder up the hill while the eagle's ripping your liver out.
Yeah. And I guess another couple ways that it could come up in readings that I found was like a lot of it's like a call to intuition. Like I think that's one of the big, huge keywords for this card is intuition.
Yeah.
I think when I went through and did my like practical Kabbalah, I came up with revelation for the card because it's like a revealing from the highest self to the higher self. But yeah, it's
What's the practical Kabbalah?
The practical Kabbalah of Omnia Revelari is a project I undertook where I made my own names for the paths. I was like really on this like got to make this practical and understandable and psychological. I got to like bring it down to earth. So I went through the whole Kabbalah and like gave a name for each path. So like, I mean, it's not really that different than what's already in there, but like one of my favorites that I really got, I feel like really helped me click with the path was for path 15, the devil. I call it belief because it's like your reality tunnel. It's the thing that's like blocking you and keeping you in and holding you in and shaping your reality and connection to the matrix or whatever. And then, your addictions, which is another thing that comes up with that card a lot, very much inform your belief system. So reality tunnel, belief, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that card is very like bondage influence, so like restriction and like restriction and addiction is very in line with that.
Yeah.
So you like customized it. So belief was the name.
Yeah. Belief was the name for that one. This one was revelation. Going backwards, the magus I have is just logos. And then the word. Yep. And then I didn't have one for the fool because the fool is just pure undifferentiated potential. Which I think undifferentiated or undifferentiation would be a good word for that one too. But yeah, I'll incorporate more of those as we go along.
I like here it's customized. Like that's like the best way to learn something is like putting it in your own words.
Totally. So. And we touched on this in the last episode, but it came back up again. I had a friend who was actually the impetus for doing that episode. They were like, I don't know anything about tarot, but I like want to engage with your podcast. Can you like talk, like do a tarot 101? And then they listened to that, and then we're still over their head because like we can't not get into the like mush mash stuff of it. But he was like, how do I learn tarot? Like, do you have any books or anything that you would recommend? And I was like, don't read the books. First just like get an intuitive understanding of the card, and then go and read the books and like see where the ideas line up or don't.
The best foundation that you're going to set for your understanding of a card is going to be whatever personal associations you have with it. Like I didn't get my first like official deck that I kind of got intentionally, the Marigold. I didn't get the book at first. I just got the deck. I was gifted the deck and I was like, oh, there's a book. But then I was like, you know what? It's good. Like, I don't want the book. And like that deck doesn't have any even words written on it. A lot of decks do have like an association, like the Thoth will have oppression or, strength or something for the small cards. This one does not. So I was totally like just thrown into it. and then you form your own associations with, you know, the energy of it, your associations with the symbolism, with the gestures or expressions of the figures. Like that's all going to be like, this reminds me of a time, blah, blah, blah. And you like, if you create your own notes on that, that's going to be a really good foundation. And then you'd be surprised how often you start researching it and you're like, oh, okay, like actually this is quote unquote the official meaning of it. But you already now have a basis of what it means to you, and that's going to be far more memorable than, oh, I have to go look it up in a book or, you know, search for what this means.
And that's what the High Priestess is all about.
Yes.
Is like using that intuition that like exists within all of us.
Yeah, so how do we get back to that? I think that's the question that
how do we get back to our intuition?
Yeah, how do we like bring the wild's knowing back? How do we like reawaken? Because I think I've been rediscovering as, you know, we go through these, like how the way, you know, algorithm and internet works. Like once you start looking stuff up, the internet will feed you more. And like that's like exciting because there's other people like learning the stuff and creating stuff. And like we want to be putting out, you know, stuff for people to be learning from and engaging with also. But it's not the same as what your own, you know, brain and spirit is going to generate as far as your own personal meaning. So like detaching from like the dopamine hit of someone like telling you what something in your life means is like truly a trial, I think, in today's day and age. So yeah, like doing your own tarot reading instead of like finding people doing them on YouTube. Like I did a tarot reading for this of like, what does the High Priestess want me to know? Like about this. And of course, one of the cards I pulled was the High Priestess.
Oh,
I was
no
like,
way.
bitch. it was the Thoth deck, which is incredibly sassy someone wants to be. But yeah, so like how do we, what have you ever had times where you've like lost touch with your deep knowing and like what brought you back?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, this has been bringing me back from like my own intuition and deep knowing. I think in the very first episode, I talk about how I don't like things that aren't etymologically sound, but then
Angles.
Yeah,
and
then
angels.
we get into angles. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of strength in that, like of just letting go of those things. So I think the first step is mindfulness, for better or worse. I know that's like a easy cop out, but like being aware of one's thoughts is really helpful to like question those thoughts, like or question the sensors in your thoughts. Like there's, you know, the first level of critical thinking, which is like to try to tear it apart, but then like to also question again that other sense of needing or wanting to tear things apart. Like, why can't I just let this thought be? Yeah. Like, what is that initial thought trying to tell me? Another not fun answer, but like working on your trauma and like trying to like get that lens out of your spiritual advancement. Like that's, your trauma is real. Your trauma shapes you. Your trauma like is valid, but the High Priestess is untouched by your trauma. Your trauma exists in the formative world of your mind and in your body. And it's something to be overcome to reach like the highest parts of yourself. So yeah, like working on your trauma and like getting to a place where your window of tolerance is high enough that you can allow more things into that window, that, you know, you're not going to be triggered when like you have a like super violent symbolic vision, because sometimes you have a symbolic vision and it's like violent and cruel and not pleasurable at all, but it's also like trying to teach you a higher truth to something.
Yeah, and I think that's the the element of trauma as part of like crossing the abyss, and letting that like attachment to that die is like the most humbling thing. And I think like that's like the idea of like crossing the abyss is kind of those like peak experiences or traumatic experiences, depending on intentionality and like what support system or skills or like tools you have. And then it's coming back. That's always like what like makes, what shapes what that experience like means and what narrative gets formed. So in the case of like intentionality, you kind of know like I'm going to come back from this. And like I think that's like the part of navigating trauma where you have like inherently in trauma like a blockage to viewing it as initiation, because it was not intentional and it was not chosen in most cases. So you're kind of forced to do double duty of like surviving and healing, and then also like being your own like intention giver, because you didn't have that to start.
Yeah. Being able to like look at where's the benefit of this thing.
Yeah. Or like viewing yourself as your own like initiatrix, rather than like at the mercy of like a cruel universe.
That brings us back once again to the existential kink thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that, I mean, it comes around because it's good stuff. It's valid. It's juicy.
It is juicy. Yeah. And it's like something that I wrestle with, because it's very easy, I think, to get into like spiritual bypassing of like, my trauma, like it's, because then the ego is also tempted to latch onto that and like discount it, when it is still very real and alive, like on a body and a material level, like that's still real, and like is always going to just like on some level be like, dang, that was like fucked up. Like that person had me fucked up. Like I wish that didn't happen. And, what narrative can I make in this where I can like make it make sense in my life and have it be something I come back from? Because then you are sort of like completing the current.
Yeah.
Like it's not just a one-way thing. Like it's something you move through.
I think that's why it's important to like build out the base of your pyramid too. Like all initiation systems start in like an earth grade, because like you need to get your body right, to get your mind right, to get your spirit right, to get your soul right, or whatever.
Yeah. I remember it was right when I started like exploring Kabbalah, but I was also like doing a lot of trauma healing and work at the time. And what you said about like window of tolerance. And I had like a little thing I wrote down somewhere, but I was just like, when the window of tolerance expands, it's a portal and you can walk through it. So I think like that's something I've been trying to get back to, of like your body's sensory tolerance like is something that is reflective of like a spiritual and psychological capacity that you can actually build.
There's something very Hellraiser there. I don't know what it is, but it's like, yeah, that sounds like something a Cenobite would say.
Oh, dang. Is that the guy with the pins in his head?
Yeah, that's Pinhead. He is a Cenobite.
I don't know Hellraiser.
We should watch Hellraiser sometime. I'm not like a big horror movie person, but Hellraiser is one that's pretty cool.
Like, doesn't he torture people? Like,
yes.
Like, dang, where did I go wrong?
Well, no, because like one of the lines they say in there is like a Cenobite is an angel to some and a demon to others. Like it does torture you, but like to what end?
Dang it. All right. Well, see, this is where we get into dangerous territory.
Yeah.
Like, is my spirit torturing me? Like, yeah.
Is it torturing me for my own benefit, or is it just torturing me to torture me for its benefit? In which case, where's the separation between you and your spirit?
Yeah, this is why I think this is like a very like not for the faint of heart path, because like there's even having like thought about this and like wrote about this for like a while, I'm so aware of like the resistance in me to be like, no, Like, and we just did oppression last time, like of like all the oppression and the cruelty in the worlds, and like to have to accept that as some sort of initiation, like on a personal level, on a global level of like the war and the genocide, and like the idea that we have to like humble ourselves to trying to have like love in our hearts despite everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of fertile ground for spiritual bypass there.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's why the magician is a juggler, because they're trying to do a balancing act there.
And like, yeah, it's like that's the nature of the polarity too, is like moving through it. So it's both. Like it has to be the both and the paradox.
Yeah. I think that's one of the first things, not like one of the first things, but I do remember like the first time we hung out talking about the like dichotomy of like understanding that spirit is like trying to experience all things with like, well, hey, that person's just starving in a shitty situation and being abused constantly because like that's how spirit wanted to manifest through them.
Yeah.
And it's like doing its own thing. It's like it's not an excuse to turn a blind eye to suffering.
Yeah.
Your own or otherwise.
Yeah. And I think like that's to bring it back to like intuition too, is like knowing which knowing like how to respond to situations like that, like which pole are you going to have, like are you going to view the spiritual pole, if we're going to call it that, as like one of detachment or one of like compassion, and likewise with like the human side, like how do we integrate those elements into our like behavior and our beliefs.
Fractal poles.
More fractals.
Yeah, you got a fractal with the spiritual, like on the spiritual side, is it detachment? Is it compassion? And then the other side of the other pole is like earthbound stuff, and then that has its own poles. There's poles within poles within poles.
Oh my God.
It's been fun looping around on the High Priestess here.
We did a lot of loops.
We did some loops, some fractals, some delving. I think we've kind of got this one in the bag, so to speak. Is there anything you want to add that we didn't get to get into with the High Priestess?
I think I'm gonna take away a renewed sense of embracing like wildness and intuition, and
I like that. I think I'm taking that away too, with my initial like discrepancy between wildness and the chastity of the High Priestess, where it's actually the same thing.
yeah, I enjoy that paradox, and also the idea of wildness as being kind of unbound from the material. Like we're in a different plane of reality, and knowing that like we all have that capacity to access that.
Yeah. Well, folks, that covers the High Priestess for us. Join us next time. Oh, actually, you know what? We're not done just yet. We got to pull another card.
Oh, yeah, we do. We're due to pull.
We're due for a pull. Let's go ahead and use Lon Milo Duquette's deck here, because my Thoth is missing one, and I like to keep my Rider-Waite in order. So as you know, or may not know if you're just tuning in for the first time, we are doing the major arcana in the order of the Fool's Journey, and we are interchanging those every so often, or every other episode, with a pull from the minor arcana. So we are going to take some time to pull our next minor arcana card, which also includes the court cards. We haven't gotten into any of those court cards yet, but those I think are part of that minor arcana.
We briefly talked about court cards in the What the Fuck is Tarot episode, but yeah, I think we'll count them as minor arcana.
I bet since we're talking about it, we'll probably pull one. I've been having a weird experience with the cards lately. Like I pulled the Seven of Wands 2 days in a row. This is an interesting story. I'll go ahead and share this for the podcast while I'm shuffling up here. But I had an interesting thing happened where the sun has, or Mars has just left Cancer and entered Leo this last week, or maybe the week before, but it was in Cancer for a while. And as a result of that, things were a little sludgy, a little muted. But so I was very excited for Mars to go into Leo, fiery sign, so we can get some more fire, warm things up a little bit. And I do my daily pull. And as I was looking through the cards, like kind of seeing flashes of them as they shuffled, I saw the Seven of Wands, which is Mars in Leo. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, because Mars is in Leo now. Like, how interesting, how fun. So I shuffled the deck more, and that day I did, I dealt the cards based on the day of the week. So I think it was like a Tuesday. So I did 3 cards, one for Sunday, one for Monday, one for Tuesday, and flipped it on the Tuesday. And there it was, the Seven of Wands. So it's like, oh, that's kind of a trip, because I was thinking of it. And then the next day, I went to do the my daily pull again. Stuck the previous card, the Seven of Wands, into the middle of the deck, and like, I'm not going to get that one again. I shuffled the deck really, really, really well, and then lo and behold, and this time I did a different means of pulling too. So the other way that I like to pull is more woo-woo, where I kind of like put my left hand on the bottom, my right hand on top, and then I sort of like visualize like Thoth standing behind me and like reaching through me as like an energetic being, and like kind of like lights up one of the cards, and then I just kind of like, with my eyes closed, like feel which one feels, or like
I love that.
Seems to have the most light coming off of it. So I did that for the second day, and lo and behold, Seven of Wands again. But that really quick is a great way to pull cards. If you're doing like a single card pull, it's a really nice way to make it have some more relevance for you. Yeah. But I think we've got pretty well shuffled here. Lux, if you would cut the deck for us. And then let's do the thing. I'm going to do a quick little visualization here of seeing a card light up.
You have a little bit of light coming right through
you,
too.
Shit. There it is. Oh, nope. That is that's a trump card. So what the hell are you doing, Thoth? Come on, man. Pull it together.
Jokester.
Trickster. All right. Let's see. I may have gotten it wrong. Let's just say that I'm the problem here. It's me. I'm the problem.
Thanks, Taylor Swift.
There we go. That's what we're looking for. Court card, the Prince of Cups. So we've got our first court card.
We knew it was going to be a court card.
We knew it was going to be one. If it wasn't a trump, it was going to be a court card. So, the Prince of Cups. This is a cool card that I don't have a lot of familiarity with. So I get to do some studying for that one and learn right alongside with you guys. But a couple things about the Prince of Cups that we're seeing right off the bat with Lon Milo Duquette's card here is he rules over 20 degrees Libra to 20 degrees Scorpio. He is October 13th through November 12th, same kind of thing. And there's a lot of water and Scorpio symbolism in this card.
So that is one of the things about the Thoth symbolism.
Symbols.
The symbolism is that the court cards are like, you can have like a birthday card, and those are what the figures of the
court
card.
That is with all tarot. The Thoth deck and Lon Milo Duquette make it really apparent, but the Golden Dawn has material that ties all of the court cards to a certain region of the zodiac.
I wasn't familiar with that association until I studied Kabbalah. So.
Yeah. I mean, where tarot is concerned, I feel like Thelema doesn't differ that far from the the Golden Dawn criteria curriculum. But one of the biggest things with that card is it is the heir of water. So
it's the masculine element of water.
Yeah, the formative world of the, what is it, receptive world? Bria? I don't remember what Bria's title is. I know that Yetzira is the formative world, but the imaginal world, maybe?
Oh, versus archetypical is the supernal triad. So that's above the abyss. We were kind of just talking about that. And then, imaginal worlds, or the world of, I don't know if thought would be that, or the lower one of Malkuth. But yeah, it's like imaginal dreams.
And then you have
emotions.
Thought, emotions are in there as well. And then you have Yetzira being the formative world, which is air. And then finally Earth, formation. But this would be the formative aspect of the imaginal world. So that's an interesting thing to think about. How does the world below manifest in the world above?
Yeah, I think Marigold associate, or actually I think several cards associate this with romance. It's like a romantic figure.
The Prince of Cups is a romantic figure, right?
Maybe because it's like emotional, kind of dreamy.
Well, stay tuned next time, folks, when we talk about this dreamy Prince of Cups and learn more about his romance. Until next time, stay feral, friends.